Perfect. All right, we're back. We're not sure how many people are going to join us for this, but we're thankful for all those that can. I know we got some folks on Zoom and watching everywhere else. This is great. Excellent. So, let's go to the first slide even, and then we'll just kind of talk this through. So here's what's been going on here and why we're doing this. We have an amazing building team. They're just a fantastic, hardworking building team that has been together for several years. And they've been working actually over the last several years on a number of different things. And we got to the point where we realized we actually had a fair amount of information. And we've even shared some of that information with all of you, but we aren't at the point where we feel like we can make a decision on all of this. And one of those reasons being is that these are decisions best made when we can have conversations together. We just can't do that. So we struggle a little bit. What do we do? Do we sit on this? Do we share this somehow? And we thought, we're going to do this. We're going to share the information, but again, not in a way that we want to have a vote at the end of this. Our hope is that by doing this now, when we do get back together and we can have more face-to-face conversation, we're able to have conversation number 2 or conversation number 3 instead of conversation number 1. So that's really the goal out of all this. Hope that you hear that. But again, still find this very important and valuable because, again, the building teams worked really, really hard, and they've got some cool stuff that they want you guys to know about. So the building team has been together since about 2018, began reviewing the focus on the facilities because a healthy church is a growing church, and we are a growing church in all senses of the word. We have even been able to grow through the pandemic. We know we've had some connections with folks that now consider Hope their home church through coronavirus, through all those things that have been happening. We've made connections for that. That's super, super cool. So we've been able to do that. That is awesome. As part of that, a church's facilities are a tool to impact the community. I think that's important to be said, and we don't want to say that in a way that, again, is dismissive of previous churches, but there was a season in the church life where the church building was the church, where the church building really was the cathedral, was the focus. And I just think we're in a much healthier spot where we recognize that the church building is a tool for ministry. It's that we're blessed by that. We're so fortunate. But what that tool can look like is different for all kinds of different communities. And so that's important. This church body has actually a long history of being able to update church facilities, making changes that they've needed. 4 different instances of remodeling existing buildings, new builds, moves, all kinds of incredible stuff. As an example, this current facility was built in 1976. And that was a pretty big move for the church from where they were before, a big expense in terms of putting all that together. Some pretty incredible history for the church from that standpoint. So our original need was this. As the building team got together, we recognized a number of things. Number one, that church seating and after church gathering, we were full. Particularly when we had one service. When we had 2 worship service times, we could kind of make this work, and we could talk about the dynamics of that. There are some challenges with that. But when we would be at one service, we were full, both in the building and certainly afterwards as well. Our fellowship space was very, very small. The parking lot was also full. The building is not ADA compliant. For those of you that know that, you know that. There's some real challenges with that. Obviously, there's no elevator. And that provides some particular challenges. The sound system and video needed upgrading. Lighting, electrical needed upgrading. We don't meet current codes for sprinklers, things like that. And again, we love our building, we absolutely do, but I think all of us that love this building can also say it feels a little bit dated. If you will. There's enough wear and tear. Again, it was built in 1976. If you're in any building from 1976, it can feel a little dated. So that was the original need as we looked at things. Then, hey, the world changed a lot. So our needs changed a little bit over the course of 2020. And so we wanted to just kind of name that. We moved fully online, obviously, in March due to COVID-19. The church reopened for a little limited amount of worship in July. So we're now actually designed where we can have 40 to 60 people upstairs and 40 to 60 people downstairs for a live stream going on at the same time. We thought about that for Easter even. If we have folks come for Easter, we could probably do somewhere between 80 and 120 folks here, which normally would make this upstairs room feel fairly full. But if we divide it between two spaces, that's much more at the 25% capacity. Then we were back to fully online. Now we're back to some people in person's not. We know that many churchgoers will remain online for the foreseeable future, and that'll actually just be a blessing for us in the future from there on out. There will always be people now on vacation or unable to come for whatever reason might come up, and they can now join us online. That's awesome. We will continue to have an online presence for as long as we are a church. We think that'll continue to be it. Then the last thing, the church has been rezoned to high-density residential, which expands our options and potential value to others. That was something that we chose to do, but part of the reason we chose to do it is because Everett is doing a rezone for the entire city. That's something Everett has been working on and wanted this area to be rezoned anyway, and so we did that process with them. So all that kind of changed things for us in 2020. We did a few things in 2020 while most of you weren't here. We thought, hey, let's get a little work done. So we worked with PUD in order to redo most of the lighting downstairs. If you actually haven't been downstairs, you would see it's way brighter. It's fantastic. That's awesome. So we're able to do that at essentially just kind of paying for labor. PUD met us in terms of where we're at for cost, so that was cool. As you probably have been able to aware, we've been able to upgrade a lot of our AV equipment for the online worship experience. Huge shout out to Tim Dell and Ray Johnson that did an enormous amount of work trying to figure all that out. Andrea Dell as well, who's here every single week running all that stuff, so that's awesome for you guys. And then we obtained a few bids for a few other things, the sidewalk on the south side of the building and some other stuff that we're going to talk about. So we did all that work in 2020. And what that ended up with was we've ended up with essentially 4 options that we can consider as a church as we now move ahead. And these are the 4 options we just want to be able to present to you so you guys can know about them, but that we may, again, we're not necessarily going to move into one of them right away, but these are the 4 options that we're going to talk through. A major remodel, a minor remodel, selling a portion of our property to help pay for option 1 or 2, or selling the whole property and build, renovate at a new site. And that's why we're actually going to talk about 4.5 options, not just 4. So here's what your building team has spent time doing. We worked with a great architect, Phil Frisk from PWF Architecture. We could do a major remodel. We're talking, knocking down walls and rebuilding the sanctuary, adding a much, much larger fellowship space, an elevator, all kinds of things like that, right? Very rough estimate, that's somewhere around $3+ million, might be 4.5. It's hard to get a really good gauge on that because for those of you that have done building projects, we'd actually need to take a couple more steps in the planning stage in order to get that for sure. But we have a rough design, some plans that are available for that. Again, it makes the fellowship space about 3 times our current size, expands the sanctuary to about 250 people, gives us an elevator access to all levels, 2 additional rooms downstairs, does sprinklers, AV upgrades, electrical upgrades, kind of all the stuff that it would take to require to get a 1976 building up to code for our day today. All right, it's a major remodel, again, $3+ million, maybe 4. Just as a side note, we've done a little bit of work on all of these. That's been the key. And we know that our best estimate on the size of loan that we would actually be able to get is about $500,000 to $600,000. So if the building is $3.5 million, and we can get a $500,000 loan, that means we have to come up with about $3 million in order to make that happen. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying that that's kind of what we do. So that's option number 1, the major remodel. All right? Option number 2, the minor remodel would be expanding the sanctuary to allow about 225 in seating. We worked with our architect to kind of get a count on that. So we would maintain the sanctuary space that we have, but if you can think about it, the back part of the sanctuary would be kicked out a little bit, so we'd have more sanctuary there, or more seating there, and then we'd actually change the front configuration so we'd have more seating here as well. We would add a 3-season outdoor deck, update the office space a little bit, and in doing all that, expanding the sanctuary and the office space reduces the fellowship space. This also does not touch electrical or sprinkler or provides no elevator. It doesn't do any of that. Again, this is a minor remodel. We would just be guessing at how much that would all cost, somewhere less than $1 million, but in terms of how much less, it's really, really hard to say. We're going to pause there and just note a couple of things. It has been generally true within the church that if a church in one service is able to get to a worship space size and fill that worship space size to be around 200, 225, that's when they're better able to expand into 2 worship services. That's generally been true. So that's why that number keeps coming up, right? When we talk about the worship space size, if we can get to a worship space size that we can fit comfortably 200, 225, 250, and then if we can grow to that, then it's way easier to expand into 2 worship services. Where we're at right now, where we have about 150 to 160, again, we can even get a little bit more than that. When we expand to 2 worship services, it doesn't work generally as well. That's been the big rub. So that's why we kept looking at that. Coming back to this minor remodel, the thing about that, why it doesn't do the electrical, sprinkler, and elevator, is that we wouldn't be expanding the square feet of the building. As soon as we start expanding the square feet of the building, we have to do all those other things. We have to do electrical, sprinkler, and elevator, and all those things like that. And that's why we would do a 3-season outdoor deck instead of adding more fellowship space as square feet to the building. Hopefully that all makes sense. If we do the major remodel, we do all that stuff, and then all that's just included. If we do the minor remodel, we just rearrange some of the indoor space, and we can create some outdoor space as long as it's a deck, and then that doesn't trigger us into having to do all those other major things. So, those are those 2 pieces, major remodel and minor remodel. Then, we've got the option to sell off a portion of the property to pay for option 1 or 2. For those of you that know our property, we have a rental house and a couple other buildings as well. It is certainly possible to break that off, to sell that, especially now that we're rezoned for higher density. Again, these are just very round sketch numbers. We don't expect anybody that we've worked with to guarantee this. But early estimates are that we could maybe sell that particular area for $300,000 to $500,000, and that then we could use that to help pay for either option number 1 or option number 2. There's a couple of different building types that might go there. Either a 3/1 housing and office structure or townhomes would actually probably be most likely to be built there. So just so you can visualize what might end up in that space. What's there currently would get knocked down, and then that's what would get put in their place. So that's what would happen. I'll explain the 3/1 actually when we get to the next one, because it makes a little more sense with that. So that could happen, or we could sell the whole thing and rebuild elsewhere. So now that the land is rezoned, and that was part of Everett's process, it actually we could, just sell the whole thing to a developer, and in terms of what that would mean, the developer would knock everything down and then build a structure that I'll mention here in just a moment. We would move somewhere else. We don't know what that would be. That is the particular challenge. As an example, again, we think, just as a rough estimate, we could probably get $3 million as the full selling price for this. Again, please hear that as just the general range that it is. And that sounds awesome. That sounds really cool. Hey, we have $3 million and no place to worship. So, those are the challenges of all that. But again, that's there, and now that it's rezoned for that, that's more of an option for that. I want to add just kind of the last wrinkle to that and why this is option now 4.5. Part of that process of figuring out option number 4, of just being able to knock down the whole thing and sell all of it, is we've had a conversation now with actually 2 developers that both had some creative thoughts about the same thing. So if we were to rebuild something here on this site, what you'd end up with is what's called a 5/2, or it might actually be a 4/2. So think about a building that has some businesses on the ground floor or the two ground floors, and then has apartments above that. That's becoming more and more common. There's one in Lake Stevens. There's a number down here already in Everett. There's one that this particular developer is building right, Mountain Lake Terrace, that I've had the chance to see. So this is a current way that most cities are actually trying to get both businesses and residential in the same area. So it's called 5/2 or 4/2 because there's 5 stories of apartments or 4 stories of apartments over 2 stories of businesses. So land developers like that when it works out really well, when the businesses that are down below are good anchor tenants and people are able to come in, and that's a real positive. This particular developer, thinking about our situation in terms of where we're at, his recommendation was actually that the church would be the businesses, would be the anchor tenants on the bottom floor. So again, just hear this as just brainstorm, but as an example, so the bottom floor would be the sanctuary space, and maybe a coffee shop and a preschool that then also serves as the nursery. And then the second floor would be offices and breakout space and Bible study space. And then above that would be residential. And then for a developer, they'd love that because they would have tenants in the bottom 2 floors set and ready to go all the time. Boom. And they wouldn't have to worry about other businesses coming in. So just creative thinking from that standpoint. So what that would mean, again, would be we'd actually work with a developer in order to knock down the building, and then instead of moving somewhere, we would move back in here once that's done. For the interim time, we would all meet at the Wallace House again. Or whatever. Again, there's all those logistics, and that's why there's no proposal about any of these for anyone right now. But that's it. So those are kind of those options right there. And we think it's important to go back now and look at our history, because this is really cool, and this is why we feel like we can have these conversations with all of you, all right? So the Swedish Evangelical Mission Church was formed in 1903 and began meeting in one building in 1904. Actually purchased their first building in 1908, renamed to something else in 1941. Building was remodeled and enlarged in 1948, renamed again in 1964, moved again in 1976, and then Hope was founded 9 years ago and was meeting in a cafeteria over in Lake Stevens, and then joined over here in 2017 and began meeting at the Rucker campus. When you look at the history of this church has always been brave and bold to make the right choice in order to reach new generations. We've always done that. So the burden's on us to do the same thing now, right? The reality is making no choice is still a choice, but that's just saying that we're fine with a building that we all know has some challenges. At some point, the fact that we don't have a sprinkler system in this all wooden structure should make us concerned, particularly when we know our electrical is also from 1976, right? I mean, there are those things that, like, we know there are things we need to do. But what that is undetermined. The building team has done an incredible job of looking at options. As we go through this, again, we're as a building team, we've been just really, really good about, hey, all options are good options. It's like brainstorm rules. All conversations are good conversations. That's important. We can go back to that first one. Obviously, the major remodel would be a ton of fun. The designs are really, really pretty. The reality of whether or not we can somehow pay for something that's going to cost us $3.5 million, like, that's part of the conversation, but we're still more just in the brainstorm part of the conversation, right? Like, let's not worry about that piece. Okay, so what would that look like? And so we've done a lot of that. We've tried to do all of that as much as we possibly can, so that when we can get back together and start talking this through, then we can start having those harder conversations. All right, well, is that one really realistic? Do we really want to do that? What would we do if we did this? All those things like that. But because we've been able to do all that, each time we end up having just really creative conversations that we never would have thought of. As we talked about trying to expand this, and how could we possibly do that when we would have no fellowship space, all of a sudden, hey, we could do a deck. Everybody does a deck here in Washington. We can cover it, and that was a creative thought that came out of the fact that people were able to have brave and bold conversations. Rezoning this, and then, actually building a structure that we come back and move into, a brave and bold choice because people were able to have creative conversations. So because we've done that, that's really, really cool, and we look forward to being able to do more of that. All right. With all of that, that was a lot of information that we just threw at all of you. And again, to be clear, there's no proposal, but we'd love to answer any questions that we can answer. There will certainly be questions that we can answer. So anybody that's either in the room or on the chat or in Zoom or Facebook or wherever you might be, if any of that raises a question for you that we can try our best to answer, we'd be happy to do that. I know the building team is scattered in all of the environments. We've got Zoom covered and YouTube covered and all those things like that. And then I can answer some stuff as well. And I know there's a delay, so that's why I'm still talking. Until, hey, we have an in-person question. Yes?
You mentioned at the beginning that the church building is a tool for ministry.
Yes.
What would be the best solution to achieve all the ministry goals?
That's a really, really good question, and I'll repeat that. So the question is, the church building is a tool for ministry. So what are the ministries that we need the tool for? That's actually the driving question. And I think we had a little bit better sense of that before 2019 as we were going into that. So that is part of, again, probably these secondary and tertiary conversations. We continue to believe that there is still value in the Sunday morning worship time. There are some church communities where that is less so, but for us, we think that will continue to be one of the primary ones. One of the secondary pieces with that, as we felt, is that if there's so many other great ministries that are happening in Everett, that we no longer feel like we want to try and copy those, but we would rather support what's going on. So that's one of the reasons why we have done all we can for Housing Hope and Everett Gospel Mission and things like that. So that's been fun. In terms of ministries that maybe aren't happening, that was more of our, okay, so is there something that's not being done as much? That is one of the reasons why we continue to talk about a preschool. There's this kind of a preschool desert. There's not a lot of preschool options in this community. And so if that were something we could do, that'd be a real positive, we think, for the community as we go forward. And then, in terms of that, just in terms of community space, that we continue to reach out and allow other community groups that have been here. That's probably maybe the third one after that. So, but that is something that we need to continue to have conversation about, because I think it changed a lot over the last couple of years. Yes.
If we did 4 or 5, would the developers let us have influence on how the first 2 floors were designed?
Good question. And Simone's going to shoot those out to me here in a sec. So, good. So, the first question coming from Lindsay Steele: if we do the sell and then developer builds and then we become the 2 down below, do we have say in how that gets designed? Yes. The short answer is yes. The long answer is, how that all works out. There's a lot to that. In fact, because of how this land is designed, we think it's even possible that we could still own the property, because we could own the bottom 2 floors and then someone else could own the top 5. But that's, again, there's a whole lot of permutations for that. But in terms of just how the bottom 2 floors would be designed, they could be built with us in mind. Again, particularly, if we decide that a preschool really does make a ton of sense to us, then we can do that intentionally. So that's a good question. Simone, others?
Does option 4, 5, will it have a fellowship hall?
A good question. So does option 4/4.5? have a fellowship hall. Yeah, that all gets to how big of the building we'd end up with. The biggest challenge of that actually would be parking. We'd need to make sure that parking would work out so that all the residents that would live here would have enough parking, but that we would be able to have enough parking when we would show up. So the next step that the architect and the developer would like us to take would be to actually design out just a rough sketch of what that might look like. We didn't do that yet because that's just a little bit of money and we wanted to present this first. So, but the bid for the sidewalk was, no, I don't remember. It was more than $5. It was definitely less than $1 million. I think it was $8,000. But I don't have that note with me, and I apologize. I thought the bid for the sidewalk was $8,000, but I could be lying. Not lying.
Thinking of the possible tax consequences of 4.5, since as a church we don't pay property taxes, right?
Yes, and that would be where, again, so the question is, thinking about the tax consequences and all those things like that. One, if we end up having to pay taxes, you pay taxes, life goes on. But two, again, that would be part of the challenge if we decided to go the route where we try to still own the lower two because we can divide up the land that way, then that would be a conversation worth having. But yeah, those are well down the road of if we were to even decide that one. What is the thinking about the timeline? That's a really, really good question. By Easter would be cool. Easter of 2025. We think these next conversations are best in person. So unfortunately, we won't even I'm not even going to worry about the timeline until we can figure out when we can get back together face to face. And then after that, yeah. As an example, the developer that we're talking with, the 5/2 that he's currently building in Mountain Lake Terrace, from start to almost ready, that was a 3-year project. But a lot of that was the design, the actual construction of the building. That doesn't take very long. It's all the other stuff that was taking that a long time. So yeah, in terms of say we were to do any of that, even the minor remodel, so much of the time is actually the pre-time. The construction time takes much less, surprisingly. Yeah.
Some ideas about English classes for families in addition to
Yes. That was one of the things that we talked about back in 2018 as we continue. So the question was, do we have questions about or ideas about the English classes and being able to do that for a community? So yes, when we were brainstorming this, that was one of the other gaps here in our community was the need for English classes, particularly around here. We did talk about that, and then all that got put on hold with COVID. So it would be very, very cool. That was something that we identified a couple of years ago as a gap, as a need, and if we can get back to the possibility of that would be fun to revisit. And I assume it hasn't gotten better over the last couple of years, but yeah, that's a good question, and maybe one that we can move into a little bit.
Not really a question, more of a concern. Is that a fear about selling the building and moving elsewhere would be that we would maybe move from Everett?
Really good question. Yes, and again, why all that's kind of premature. So the question is, or more a concern, if we were to sell, where we would move to, would we move out of Everett? Those are, those are really long conversations that we would have all together. So. Would a developer be able to kick us out as tenants? That's a really good question. No, Because we wouldn't let them. Like, we own it now, so we can set up the contract to do what we need it to do for us. Could that possibly change? I mean, yeah, sure, anything I guess is possible. But no, we would design the contract to allow us to stay. So, yes. No.
What's an approximate cost for like a 200 to 250 worship space if you were just to start over and have to buy land and everything else? Is that like 10 million and everything else? Just for any idea?
So yeah, really good. If we were just to start from scratch, buy land and build a simple structure, that's probably a $3 million project. You can do it for cheaper. The trick is land. When we were over in Lake Stevens, we spent a good year and a half looking at pretty much every land piece, flat land piece, or thing that we could convert. And land was by far just the biggest challenge. To get a simple structure up, again, there was to get land and get it building ready was the biggest cost. The building itself, there were creative ways of being able to do that for cheap. It's always just land. Yeah.
Would a parking garage be an option as opposed to a parking lot?
That's a good question. If we end up doing the stay and the 4/2 or 5/2, would a parking garage be an option? We think so. But again, those are a couple of steps down the process that we can't say that for sure talking with the developers. So yes, it is possible instead of just doing that's one thing actually. If you can think of our area and you can think of where the rental house is and then where the parking lot is, they're at two different levels. That actually works to our advantage in terms of parking, that we've got multiple levels for people to come in and out of already. That was one of the things that got them to think about that actually, is that would actually be a positive. Good questions all around. Any other questions? Did you have one or no? You're good? Cool. Good. I suppose maybe the last wrinkle would be we have had a conversation about cars to housing kind of coming into our parking lot. And we're going to give you more information about that here in the next couple of weeks. We've got some feedback on that. So you'll hear about that. That obviously might change in the future, but again, for right now, like, we're not at any point where we're going to be doing anything that would change that for the short term. So you will still see that presentation that will still come forward here in the next couple of weeks. So just FYI that will, you'll find out more about that, here pretty soon. Very good. So, excellent questions. Again, really good. Your building team is amazing. I'm going to not remember them all. So it is Ray Johnson and Tim Dell and Greg Walker and Linda. What? Yeah. Linda, you're throwing me off. Sorry. Well, Linda White, Erica Price, Patty Pote, and Kelly Statham. They're just fantastic, and again have done so much of this work. We can't wait, to again be able to talk about it with you all a little bit more, and see what's next. See what we decide based on how things are going and how many people start coming back and all those things like that. What that changes for us, we know that that'll actually be part of it as well. How the community has now changed because of everything that's happened over the last couple of years. So, again, their work is incredible. And as you can see, they've got so many cool, clever, creative ideas that whatever we feel God calling us to, I feel like we'll be able to start navigating together. So that's going to be really fun. All right. Any more? No? Good. Awesome. Thank you. If any of this causes you angst or anxiety, please don't hear it as that. we're not pushing anything, certainly not in the near future. Nothing is going to be asked to be voted on or anything like that. We're a long ways from that. We just wanted you guys to know that, yeah, you've got a building team that's worked really, really hard. And yeah, at some point, we'll have some really fun face-to-face conversations. It'll be really cool. All right, cool. Let's pray over that and call it good. God, again, thank you so much. Thank you that you've called us in the community to continue to reach people, to continue to find ways to connect with the people that we are just designed really well to connect with. We are super thankful for the folks that have gone before us, that built the structure that we are in. What foresight! What incredible work on their behalf. We are the beneficiaries of it, and because of that, we just feel called to continue to use this structure to the best of its ability, and to find ways that we can continue to do that for generations to come as well. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. Thanks all for watching, wherever you're watching from, being live here in person or wherever you may be. And we'll see you back here next week. Bye-bye.